He told me to look at him if I didn't know what to do, and I just blew it right off. So we are recording this session, not visually, but you'll be able to get the PowerPoint and hear our explanation of what's in the PowerPoint. We'll be delivering that to Meredith. So if you have people who were unable to hear what we said, or I think this is what they said, but I'm not really sure, it's going to live on in infamy. So it'll be recorded for you, so we'll be able to easily explain our ideas and thoughts as we went through this process. So the team will, I'm going to introduce myself, then have the team introduce themselves, and then we'll start the process. Again, I'm Mary Helmer. I'm the state coordinator for Main Street, Alabama. I've been here almost 4 years. Prior to that, I spent 10 years as a local Main Street manager in Emporia, Kansas. So I've walked the walk and talked the talk of what Meredith is doing, and frankly, we had a higher vacancy rate than what you currently have in your downtown when we had ours. And trust me, it can be turned around. There is hope and wonderful hope and opportunity for you guys within your community. After that, I was a state coordinator in Kansas for 5 years, helping to lead their state Main Street program. And then I decided to kick into the consultant world for about a year or so when I received the call from Alabama asking if I would be interested in coming here and helping restart the statewide coordinated program in Alabama, and was blessed enough to be selected for the job. So I've it's been quite a whirlwind tour for me. It's very fun to talk to other Alabamians at this point and tell them the places I've been, because most of them probably haven't been to as many places in Alabama as I have at this point. So I'm feeling pretty good and indoctrinated into the state at this point, and can tell you, when my family asks me, what in the world are you doing in Alabama? I said, first of all, it's beautiful. The people are wonderful, and it's 4 hours from the mountains to the beach, baby. We don't have that in Kansas. So I truly enjoy being here and have enjoyed getting to know the state and the people. So a little bit about me. I'm going to have the team just go in order, introduce themselves.
My name is Ben Muldrow. I'm with Arnett Muldrow & Associates. We're based out of Greenville, South Carolina. I live in Milford, Delaware, and I will be talking about the promotions point today.
Good afternoon. I'm Jay Schwensog. I'm with Downtown Professionals Network. We're based in Franklin, Tennessee. I'm going to talk about economic vitality.
And I'm Randy Wilson. I'm from Columbia, South Carolina with Community Design Solutions. We're also serve as the architect for the Main Street, South Carolina program, so I'll be addressing design today.
Wonderful. So when I arrived here almost 4 years ago, we inherited as a new organization, new statewide organization, 10 communities, and Anniston was one of those communities who had been a Main Street program for a very long time, 20 years, since 93. But without a statewide coordinating program for almost 10 years, it's just difficult to keep the momentum and the excitement flowing. And I'm just so pleased that Anniston has reached out to Main Street, Alabama to say, you know, we could use some help with a refresh. We could use some help to understand the basics of a Main Street program, but we didn't want to go all the way to a brand new program. So I brought in a little bit different team than I normally do for our refresh attempt here, because I really wanted you guys to get credit for what you've done and the cool things that are already happening here, and take you to that next level quickly. And I think you'll be pleased with what we came up with. So Wednesday night, think what night I was here. Wednesday night, we did a visioning retreat. Now, the visioning piece is where the community gets to participate in what they want the downtown to be. And if you don't allow the community to participate on the front end, they don't play or pay on the backside. So it was really important that we took that time and did about a 2-hour community visioning. And this is just some of the words that were used. Then everybody voted. We had voting things along the wall. And at the end of it, we took the top 2 or 3 in each of the categories and crafted the vision for the next 5 years. So typically we do 5-year visions. So I'm going to go through the vision with you. These are your words from the community as what they want downtown Anniston to be, not mine. So in 2022, downtown Anniston is known for its historic character, wide boulevards, and amazing architecture. It is the center of the city and county with outstanding potential for redevelopment. Old perceptions of the area have been consistently met with positive action, including the creation of green space along the streets with flowers, plants, trees, resulting in a family-friendly outdoor space and improving the pedestrian scale downtown. Vacant and underutilized space has been identified and matched with entrepreneurs who meet the market demand, reigniting community investment and pride in the downtown district. Boutique retail, arts, cultural, creative activities, family entertainment, open music venues, and sports-driven events are a draw for locals, tourists, visitors, and surrounding communities in the region. Utilizing an array of outstanding, recently completed plans, the community is united in both the public and private sectors to implement those plans, resulting in quality downtown redevelopment projects that attract a diverse mix of commercial, residential, retail, and cultural activities. A unified, cohesive marketing approach has rekindled community pride and conversation. Local interest is high. Volunteers are welcomed and embraced for their enthusiasm to make downtown Anniston the best that it can be. It is understood that in the past there has been resistance to change and skepticism to new initiatives, but now is the time to move forward with new enthusiasm and energy. Downtown Anniston is aesthetically pleasing. Downtown Anniston is inviting. Downtown Anniston is fresh. Downtown Anniston is innovative. Downtown Anniston is engaging the community. Most importantly, downtown Anniston is yours. Be a part of it. Pretty cool vision. So now's the time to act. We are not here as a team to start over from the very beginning and not take into consideration the quality work that has already been done here. And the guys are going to hit on that as we go through the process. So in addition to the vision, I got to do the organization point. So I'm going to cover that quickly. Talk to you guys a little bit about Main Street is about 4 points: organization, design, promotion, and economic vitality. And each of those is very important to the success of your downtown. So just doing one piece and ignoring the other three is a recipe for disaster. So you have to make sure you're working cohesively. So first of all, you need a strong organizational foundation. And that means looking at partners, funding, volunteers, and getting people to work toward a common goal. The first piece of that is communication. Where's Susan? I quoted Susan. Perception is our greatest strength and our greatest weakness. And it is. It is here. As we come from the outside looking at Anniston with fresh eyes and looking at it from a different perspective, you have some amazing things going on here. So utilize having more positive perception. So that communication is key to changing those and inviting people to be involved and informed about the reality of the potential of downtown Anniston. So one of the things we're going to be working with the organization committee with is understanding the link of communication as it relates to the community. And it can't be one prong of communication. We're going to have to use a lot of different formats. And we'll talk through that. Once this process is complete, we will all go back to our respective areas and write a report that will be delivered to the Main Street Anniston group that'll have more detail on how to implement these pieces. So some of those pieces were media relations, presentations, a website, printed materials, speakers bureau. Another part of organization is partnerships. Main Street does not own everything that happens in the downtown district. There's a lot of things going on. And frankly, the downtown is the one place in your community that everybody owns, that everybody has a stake in at one point or another. So there's going to be a lot of partnerships that need to be built along the way. So part of the activity is going to be identifying who the stakeholders are and encouraging additional participation and discussion as we move forward. The other part of organization is funding. So how are we going to fund the things that need to occur in your downtown area? Now, frankly, coming from a local Main Street program that wasn't as well supported as this one is by your city, I'm a little jealous as to what you've got. So the funding piece is sometimes it's realizing you're really on a different scale than most cities with the support that you currently have. But let's talk about how other partners can get involved and how that funding can be. And it's truly important for you to understand the leveraged funding opportunities that are available in this area. So how do we take USDA? How do we take historic tax credits? How do we take new market tax credits and work all them together to get you, because you have big buildings, which means they're big projects, to get those accomplished. So we'll be working on that. And then the last part of organization is really that community involvement. Main Street isn't about Meredith. Main Street isn't about Meredith's board. Main Street is about all the people who can be involved. And to that, they've done a really nice job of going ahead and putting up the 4 points up here. So when you're looking and listening today to our presentations, if any of these points are of interest to you, you say, hey, I'd like to be involved in that, you can sign up right over here on the wall. So Meredith is already on top of that. But it doesn't always have to mean that you belong to a committee and you have to be at those meetings. If you're not a meeting person, you don't want to do that, but I'd really like to be involved in that event. We need both of those. So you'll need at any given time, when I was a local Main Street manager, at any given time we'd have anywhere from 50 to 250 or 300 people involved in what was going on with the Main Street program. So it's not closed, it's very open opportunity. So if you want to be involved, there's no reason to not be involved. So that's just a real quick overview of the organization piece. I'm going to turn it over to Jay for economic vitality.
Thank you, Mary. Hey, everyone. Wow, look at you all packed this room again. And a good-looking crowd, too. How many of you are excited? Anyone excited? A little bit excited? Come on. This is always exciting for me. I started my Main Street World career tour journey, whatever you want to call it, more than 27 years ago. And I was actually sitting on your side of the table as a kid, if you will, in my hometown that was just getting together with groups now and then, talking about all these great things we wanted to do about downtown and not really knowing how to go about it. And we heard about this Main Street thing, and going through that process, I was just so intrigued that when the time came that it was time to hire an executive director, I just thought, I'm going to throw my hat in the ring and see what happens. And God bless them, a group there gave a kid with absolutely no experience, no clue, a chance. And here I am, 27, almost 30 years later, still doing Main Street and getting invigorated by folks like you who are going to make great things happen and are making great things happen in downtown Anniston. Now, I'm dating myself. I'm thinking I've probably been doing Main Street longer than most of you, and I've been doing Main Street longer than a couple of the attendees here today, which is pretty awesome. They haven't even been on the earth for 27 years, so glad to see them all here. I'm going to talk about economic vitality, and of the 4 points that you're going to hear about today, it's probably the one that tends to be the most mysterious, or the one that folks have a difficult time wrapping their hands around and really knowing what that is. So let's start here. In the Main Street world, economic vitality is economic development, but it's a little bit different than how we might think about economic development and how it occurs from the textbook. In other words, we're not talking about economic development out in an industrial park or scratching off a field somewhere and putting up big, bright, shiny new buildings. Let's face it, there's already an economy that exists in downtown Anniston. And so as we think about economic development and economic vitality in the Main Street world, it contemplates how do we work with those that have already made an investment here? How do we work with buildings that were constructed 75, 100, 150 years ago and think about new kinds of uses, contemporary kinds of uses that can be accommodated within the confines of those wonderful historic structures that set you apart from anyone else. Now, I could go on, but I think the easiest way perhaps of demonstrating what economic vitality is to simply show you. But there is a test involved. And no, I know what some of you are thinking, oh no, this is economic vitality, we're going to talk about market analysis, and he's going to spend the next 30 minutes talking about the theories behind Riley's law of retail gravitation. No, we're going to do that a little later. No, but there is a test involved. It's a simple eye test. You didn't have to study. No panic involved here. I'm just going to show you an image, and you tell me what you see. Come on, this is the only public participation. What?
Rooftops.
Rooftops. No cars. Anyone else? History. All good answers, but not the one I was looking for. Oh, one more. What? No aesthetics. Are you naked Nancy today? No. All good answers, but not the one I was looking for. What you see here is a about 1,000-foot view of economic vitality. Here's the thing. is that Randy often talks about when he's in a community, he looks at the community through a lens of design, what it looks like, how it feels, how folks interact within the environment. When it comes to economic vitality, we need to look a little bit deeper and perhaps a little bit closer and inside some of the nooks and crannies of downtown. And by the way, this is my chance to tell you, this presentation you're seeing today is going to be chock full of professional photography and professional images that have been generated just for you. It's just not during this segment. But let's start here. Now, most of you probably see a rather nondescript kind of scene of the street, but when you pull in a little bit closer, you see a business owner out there with a broom actually taking care of downtown. Hey, this goes back to old school days. Yeah, I didn't have a chance to meet this gentleman because the team was telling me, come on, let's go, let's go. But you know, as you go up and down the street, that economy is made up of people like this, that have made an investment and that have stories to tell. And it includes a mix of those folks that have been here a good long time. They made those investments decades ago. And in many ways, they're institutions unto themselves. But there's also this new breed, if you will, this new mix of folks like Justin who are staking their claim in downtown today. We met with a group of business and property owners yesterday. I'm guessing there were 10, 12 folks in the room. 3 of those folks, so 3 of the 10 or 12, 3 of those folks have opened their business in downtown Anniston within the past year. Actually, 2 of them. 1 will be opening their business in the coming months. So there's already something happening in downtown Anniston. Justin, you look so happy in this photo. You were really happy when I came by to get this photo today, weren't you? Is he excited or what? And then you get inside, you find these unique spaces, you find quality products, you find unique kinds of products. I was trying to figure out how I could take that 10-foot giraffe back in the car because I know my daughter would love it. I haven't figured that out yet. And you see people just enjoying these spaces. And again, in buildings that today are occupied by contemporary uses. And you see life in Anniston happening in downtown. And so as we think about economic vitality, it starts with working with those that have already made that investment and those that are joining the downtown. And as much as we like to talk about recruitment, recruiting new businesses and doing new development, all good stuff, but our first and primary focus has to be on working with those that have already staked their claim in downtown Anniston and in the future of this community. And sometimes that involves counterleaning. And we really encourage our economic vitality committees to get out there and do this counterleaning. It goes back to the communication piece that Mary's already touched on. We need to be working not through email, not through text, but face-to-face and working together with these folks that are already in the downtown. And so our Economic Vitality Committee members are going to become very good counterleaners having those discussions. And it doesn't always have to be one-on-one, getting together in small groups and just talking about how we can work together. Again, thinking about that business and property owners meeting that we had here yesterday, there was good conversation already, some ideas for how we could better work together to promote each other. And as we think about all the different things that we want to offer to those new prospects, those new folks that might be joining the mix, we need to remember that there's folks here that already have staked their claim again in downtown. And when we asked, are there things that we could do, help facilitate to improve your business, that might help sharpen your business and make it more competitive in the marketplace? We heard things like, yeah, we could use some help with social media and cooperative advertising. Those are the kinds of things, value-added services, if you will, that an Economic Vitality Committee and Main Street program can effectively deliver. So, test 2. Are you all ready now? You know how this works now, all right? Tell me what you see.
Opportunity.
Wow, you all,
Quick learners.
yeah, look at me even turned negative Nancy. Yeah, and thank you. You know what? You all got this real quick. You're quick learners. Because you know what most people see when they look at this, right? Vacancy. Yeah. They see the vacancy. But in fact, that is an opportunity. I'll even take it one step further for you. Donovan Ripkema, who's kind of a guru in the economic vitality circle of Main Street, a couple, 3 years ago, he did a study with Georgia Main Street and estimated the lost economic value or activity of a traditional average size storefront. And he ran the numbers, including everything from sales to salaries and wages to taxes and such. And the number that he came up with was about $387,000 in lost economic activity. Now, you could argue with those numbers, and let's say he was only half right. Let's say it's only $200,000. I actually tend to think he was conservative, but let's say it's only $200,000. So right now, if you were to go up and down the street around downtown, just think of every one of those vacant storefronts that you pass and just 200,000, 400, 600, 800. In my neighborhood, those are still big dollars. And what I'm really trying to emphasize is that it's in all of our best interests to work together, to fill those gaps and to fill those opportunities. And so part of that is just simply promoting those opportunities and things like posters or clings that go on windows to celebrate and bring attention to the opportunity that resides in these spaces can be real important, both in terms of identifying those opportunities, but also beginning to affect the messaging, if you will. And we had a really good conversation yesterday about messaging and how folks are going to take cues from us as we begin to tell and continue to tell the story about downtown Anniston. And when we do think about market research, and there will be a market research component to this. I know that scares some of you, but it doesn't always have to be doing surveys and digging into statistics and stuff. Let's take it out on the street. And when you're doing some of your events, just showcase some of these windows of those opportunities and give folks a chance to identify what would they like to see in those spaces. Some of the very best kinds of research that happen, it happens out there on the street with those that already have some familiarity or a stake in downtown Anniston. You do have some data already available. Main Street Alabama has helped you out and provided some statistics. You also have other resources for that. One of the things that'll be important going forward is making sure that we're tracking what's happening in downtown, because things are about to bust loose here. And as good as that demographic data and the retail data is, it doesn't tell the whole story or the real story, the real-time story of what's happening on the street. And so being able to use that information to help tell about what's really happening, the progress that's being made, and the investment that's occurring here is going to help us make a better and stronger appeal to those that want to join the mix. Last one, test number 3. Y'all kind of know how this works now, so here we go. What do you see? And that's from one of our team members. Brilliant, Ben. I heard some really good answers. It's not the one I was looking for. The answer is a different time. It was one of the first things I heard when I landed here. It actually came from Toby. I wrote it down. He said, it's a different time. It's a different time here. And I have completely bought into that. Consider some of the big changes that are going to be occurring in the downtown. Big changes. I mean, in other communities, we would talk about some of the development that's going to be occurring. We would refer to that as game changers. And it could very well be for downtown Anniston. And kudos to the city and to all the partners that are involved in these projects for making those happen. There is going to be opportunity to use, to leverage, if you will, what's going to be happening with some of those larger investments to think about how we fill in the gaps. And when we talk about business development and, if you will, recruitment on Main Street, what we tend to emphasize are those homegrown kind of opportunities, working with local folks who have an idea, working with local folks who just need a chance. And there are ways of doing that. There are all kinds of different startup kinds of contests and programs out there, and we can provide you more examples as part of the written document we'll be leaving with you. Do want to emphasize, though, that while there tends to be a lot of emphasis, a lot of focus on retail, and retail is an important part of the downtown economy, no doubt, it's not all about retail. It's not all about retail. You have a really cool kind of mix. That's almost a slice of Anniston and a slice of Anniston life already existing in downtown Anniston. There are gaps, and one of the goals here has to be intensifying development and intensifying density to help fill some of those gaps. But as you look around, you've got non-retail kind of businesses that help generate the very kind of traffic that will support your eating and drinking places and your retailers. And so as we think about the evolution, the ongoing evolution of downtown Anniston, it has to think about neo-traditional anchors and those other kinds of businesses that generate people and dogs. Yeah, I love that one, don't you? Now, I was thinking, can I take both the giraffe and him home? I was disappointed when they told me he wasn't for sale. The arts certainly have a place, and we're really excited about what's happening with Catalyst and how that can also be part of that vibrant mix in downtown. And as you look up, there is abundant opportunity to cater to what today is a growing segment or segments of the population that will choose to live in a downtown setting. Different studies have shown that in communities, anywhere from 1% to 3% of the population will choose to live in a downtown. Using simple math, 2% of 25,000 is about 500 units. Yeah, you could almost accommodate that downtown, but we're not there today. But we also have to think about dispelling this notion of perhaps what downtown housing used to be, because those segments of the population that are looking to live downtown are looking for these cool and funky kind of places. The cool thing is they can only be developed downtown in your prized historic buildings. And finally, to make this happen, as we think about how do we catalyze investment and development, part of that is just going to be continuing to do what you're doing, but perhaps think about how can we make this even more user-friendly? Can we provide a roadmap or a step-by-step way of when someone has that idea, when someone's contemplating an investment, this is where you go, and here are the steps, 1, 2, 3, 4. Here's how we get it done. And for Anniston, maybe that happens out of a storefront somewhere in downtown Anniston. Maybe there's actually a location where you can get in the pipeline and you can find someone that'll help walk you through that process from A to Z, or A to double Z, whatever it may be. But it's also a chance for you to really demonstrate that this is a different time. Because we heard that, Anniston's always been kind of known to be difficult to work with as compared to Oxford and some of the other communities around the state. I'm not sure that's true anymore, but a great way of demonstrating that is to actually take that to the street and demonstrate it, show folks. So I'm excited. I'm excited because you can already see economic vitality happening on the street. And as you think about some of the larger developments that are on the horizon, those could be game changers. But there already is this smaller swelling area, smaller entrepreneurs, folks with ideas that are joining the mix. It's an exciting time for you. We will be providing a written document in a few weeks. Just want to remind you that available now from mainstreetalabama.org is the development guide. So there are availables out there already that you can dig into. Folks, thank you so much. Good luck with you down ahead.
Good afternoon. I'm going to be addressing the design and on screen now. It's sort of a technical definition of what we mean by Main Street design. Visual reality. That's a fairly high definition. So I'm going to give you a simple illustration of Main Street design through crowd participation. So this is what you need to do right now. You look at somebody at the table, straight in the eye, and with enthusiasm and sincerity. I'm not continually looking at somebody, okay? Everybody ready? With enthusiasm and sincerity. Repeat after me. I'm so glad you don't look like me. Thank you. You are very good and obedient children. All right. That little simple test actually has a great deal to do with downtown Anniston. Yesterday at the lunch table, I challenged those I was sitting with, tell me the competitive advantage that downtown Anniston has over, and I mentioned a couple of other places, and just for sake of not picking on other towns and places, I'm not going to mention them. But I mentioned things that you might consider to be, having more opportunities or more wealth or more big box retails. But the competitive advantage that downtown Anniston has is there's only one downtown Anniston, Alabama on the planet. There is only one place where the precise assemblage of beautiful historic buildings that exist like yours do, and that's in downtown Anniston, Alabama. And therefore, it is imperative that we apply a historic preservation and a high design approach to ensure we safeguard all of those unique assets that only exist here. Just up the road, there's a little town that will remain nameless, has this big mall called the something something exchange. Guess what? I passed 15 of those on my drive from South Carolina to here. I can get that anywhere, but I cannot see what I can see on Noble Street anywhere else in the world. And that's the Main Street approach to design, and that's what we want to care for. So today I'd like to address 4 things with you pertaining to design and planning in downtown Anniston. I first want to give a big shout out and address your existing plans. Then I want to give a little bit of specific instruction to the design committee. In case you didn't know it, it is an absolute scientific fact that the design committee is the absolute best and most enjoyable of the 4 committees. So if you're going to sign up, that's the one. I want to give some instruction to them, and you'll realize how much fun they're going to have. Number 3, I want to address briefly some treatments that we can do to your vacant buildings to buy you time until they're occupied and sustaining themselves. And then finally, we're going to talk about this notion of vibrancy grants. You already have a terrific incentive and grant program. I would like to put that on steroids in some very unique ways, okay? So the first thing I want to do is give a huge shout out. You would be surprised, nay, shocked, to travel with us all across America, walk into downtowns and say, tell us the operating plans that you're using to make informed design and development decisions, and crickets. Okay? They don't have these plans. By contrast, you all have a number of high quality plans, and I want to affirm that good work, and I want to point out a few things related to those that I specifically want to encourage you to continue down the path of that relate primarily to design and planning. The first was a strategic plan that I believe, if my memory serves me correct, was completed in 2014. My suspicion is that many of you in this room were in that room when that was formulated, because 800 to 1,000 people participated in that process. It's one of the single best strategic plans I've ever written.
Red.
Thank you. That would be correct. This is why you have team members, okay? As pertains to city image, one of the recommendations was to create a coordinated program to significantly reduce the number of vacant and dilapidated buildings. I want to mention to you, not today, but in the follow-up report, I'm going to have a complete section of proven strategies that have been employed around America to help address this issue, because it's a very thorny issue, and it's almost a universal issue, and I want to give you the tips that we've learned in other places. You had another section that addressed place. One had to do with enhancing the process for handling vacant lots. I'm going to show you some short-term strategies near the end of my presentation today. And then finally, develop more mixed income housing. In the follow-up report, again, I'm going to share with you some creative strategies that I believe can bolster your attempts to satisfy some of those design and planning related goals. By the way, the reason there's so few up there is because most of them have been done or in process. Another very, very competent plan that was done in 2016 was the Downtown Anniston Multimodal Plan. Sometimes it's simply referred to as the Downtown Core Plan. This plan was developed through another process, a landscape architect out of Birmingham by the name of Amy Smith, right, did a phenomenal job with this. And I just want to affirm some things on this slide. This is showing a kind of a prototypical section or block of Noble Street. And the kinds of things that this lady and her group and the designers are promoting, I would absolutely advocate for. As a matter of fact, I can't tell you how many times I thought, that's exactly what I would have done. That's exactly what I would have recommended. And to a team, we felt the same way. But some of the primary things that you can note here is the fact that they've removed the middle medians and placed bump outs at the corners and at the mid-block for large shade trees. If there was anything that I noticed on my tour downtown was like, where did the trees go? It was kind of mysterious. And it's amazing the impact that just a few large shade trees can make on a downtown environment. This is from our work in Elba, Alabama a few months ago. And again, in a very, obviously a different street section than yours. I understand that. I just simply want to show you this place with only the implications of corner and mid-block shade trees. And it's almost like a new place, the difference that it can make. And again, the important thing is to plant large shade trees so that when they mature, the canopy will be above the storefront level so you can still see into all of the businesses that are located along Noble Street. Some of the other illustrations that Amy and her team developed pertain to just those outdoor amenities, whether it was on the sidewalk or these parklets. I love the notion of this pocket park or plaza, if you will, taking advantage of vacant space to give it back over to green space for pedestrians and activities. And I really, really liked her logic and thought about how to transform some of these forgotten spaces in our downtown. The rears of the buildings are the alleys. And I like the notion of having one-way circulation patterns so that it makes it very easy for you to navigate the block and find your plethora of parking resources. If there's ever been a town that we've worked in that had more parking than you could ever hope for, this is the place. Y'all are so very blessed. You will never have a parking quantity problem. You may have a, management problem, but we can address that in some other strategies. The design committee, I just want to kind of give you a few kind of tips in terms of some initial things that are easy for you to do that could buy some big impact in the downtown. For the record, the design committee is charged with doing three primary things: education, advice, and planning. And when it comes to education, of course, we can do the kind of things that you would expect people to do if they're trying to educate people. Yes, we can have a brown bag lunch like this where you can bring in a designer, an architect like David. He could lecture you about historic architecture. You can bring Amy in and talk about landscape architecture. You can bring in different people to speak, and that's a really fine way to communicate information about design and planning. One of the more effective ways sometimes is simply to walk the downtown area with a designer, especially an interior designer, and look at your storefront window displays and how can these be improved. You know, make it a very active and interactive approach to design. Sometimes the best way, at least with my kids, the best way to educate them is for them to not know they're being educated, okay? And so some of the ways we've done this in the past, we had one town where we first had a photo contest. And you were asked to go out and photograph architectural details that can be found in the downtown. And what was interesting is when they were done and they were all put in a pop-up gallery in a vacant store, a lot of people didn't even believe those came from this town because they were so cool. Well, the fun thing after that is we said, all right, so we now have this pop-up gallery full of architectural detail photographs from our downtown. We awarded a winner of that, so there was like a grand prize then, and then we turned it into a scavenger hunt. And now you're charged with going out into the community and finding all of these architectural details. And what it did is it had the effect of reacquainting people with their downtown, and they had forgotten, man, I forgot what a cool building this was. What an awesome downtown. And the person who found the most of those details, they too won an award. And then we took those and we could develop those into posters that showed various details. One of my favorite things is maybe convert those into coloring books for the children. And what you've done is people have kind of learned about their downtown, be reacquainted with their downtown without even thinking about it. Obviously, walking tours. We enjoyed so much walking with David, him giving us some background on some of the places and the buildings in your downtown. But I would encourage you to do it in a slightly different way. If you're the design committee, I would charge you and perhaps the historic preservation committee with writing the, shall we say, the commentary or the information that would talk about a place or a site or a building or a historical event. But I would encourage you to reach into your local high schools and allow these students, like in Greenburgh, Kentucky, Ben and I were doing some work. This is back when he and I were young. And we got to this place and we were waiting to do the community tour, and they said, we need to get going. And like, just wait, just wait. And one high school student came up, and then another, and then a few more. And you could see the group that finally came all the way to us. And these group of students, they toured us around the downtown, and they told us about the historic events. They told us about the places. They told us about the buildings. And while their presentations probably weren't as good as an adult would have made, do you understand the power of what they had accomplished? They have guaranteed that the stories of their place that make them special and unique have gotten passed down to the next generation of people from Greensburg. And so I would encourage you to do the same thing, to engage your students in the process of these walking tours and the design committee. You're also charged with doing advice and planning. And so what I want there is to be a day when the store owner who is thinking about fixing up their building or doing a new sign, their first phone call is to the design committee. Hey guys, what would you suggest? I'm open, and I want them to give very quality advice. I want them to have resources on tap that they can give them on how they could fix up their storefronts, et cetera, et cetera. And then when it comes to planning, again, as the city is implementing all of these plans, the Main Street Design Committee has a role to play in terms of convening the masses and garnering agreement. This is a plan that we did in a town in South Carolina. We were trying to navigate, well, what kind of fountains do we want? What kind of benches do we want? What kind of street furnishings do we want? And so the Main Street Design Committee hosted this workshop where people got to vote on their preferences for some of those items. So those are some of the roles that the Design Committee can play to engage all of the people in your downtown. The most important word in this section isn't even on this slide, okay? It's vacant building treatments, but the most important word, it needs to be temporary, okay? I'm about to show you some tricks, if you will, some tricks of the trade on how we can take the edge off of the appearance of our vacant buildings. But I want to make sure they don't stay that way long. These are just Band-Aids. They're temporary things to take the edge off. And of course, you already know this because you've done this, but one of the simplest things you could do is place art in vacant storefronts. And again, you've done this on Noble Street. You have a pop-up art gallery. So kudos to you guys for understanding a way to activate what would otherwise be an empty and a static building. Other strategies are, I believe we now have a large format printer. This is simply white butcher paper, where an old historic streetscape scene was printed on the paper, taped to the inside of the window. And you're so drawn to the nostalgia of the image that you don't even really notice the fact that the building is actually empty. In the case of Barry, Vermont, they use these sort of paper panels to tell the story of their history. Perhaps you could do the same thing with Fort McClellan, or the Freedom Bus issue. I mean, there's the Freedom Riders Bus issue. There's so many things that you could do to kind of tell these unique and authentic stories of your place. I love the fact that they included historic postcards and photographs in their testimonials. I know you're in the process of working with vinyl cleanings on windows, and that was really helpful in Arkadelphia, Arkansas, because this building was actually completely occupied, but it looks unoccupied because they had to make the windows opaque because of the nature of the business inside, which was a pharmaceutical company. And so by using vinyl clings, we could apply historic postcards on the outside, again, to transform a vacant, dead building into almost an outdoor museum. And then one of the simplest things you can do is build community pride. These are simple 11 by 17 posters that you can print on your own office or home color printer. And we just took photographs of different people in downtown Conway, South Carolina, with a simple testimony about why they love or why they lived or why they worked in Conway. And the effect was the fact that not only was it intriguing to find out what these people said about your place with the people you want to go to school with or you go to church with or you see every day on the outside, but you're so drawn to reading everybody's individual stories, you've forgotten the fact that you just walked past an empty building. So those are some strategies that you can employ, but again, the key word is temporary. These are not the solutions for the long haul. In the long haul, we want to fill these buildings with vibrant businesses. Speaking of vibrancy, I'd like to conclude to talk about some vibrancy grants. Now, I want to start with talking about facades, because right now you guys are doing a phenomenal job with the DDI grants, and you are executing normal facade grants. And by that I mean you apply for a grant to fix up your entire facade, and there's a match associated with that. It's a terrific tool that's been used thousands of times all across America, and I admire you not only for doing it, but for funding it in such a robust way. I want to mention an additional approach to facade grants that will lead to vibrancy grants. And that approach is what we call facade component grants. And this is how it contrasts with a traditional building approach. With a facade component, you simply take a typical component that's associated with an overall facade redesign, and you only offer that one component per year. For example, in 2017, you might offer new awnings. In 2018, maybe or perhaps you offer new signs. In 2000, what comes after 18, 19, it's paint. And here's the benefits of this approach. The benefit of this approach is it takes less money to make an impact. For the building owner who might be intimidated by us architects or by the proposition of fixing up their entire building, it's a pretty easy thing to ask and answer. Do I need a new awning or not? It's simple, yes or no. Do I need a new sign or not? Yes or no. And the final thing is, over time, more people get to play. Now, yes, it will take more time for all of the buildings to be improved, but more buildings get to play at any given single time. And the key, and it's a strategy that we're all going to reinforce, is to constrain the area where it occurs so that these improvements to these buildings make a visual impact. In other words, you don't want to do this all over the city or else they'll get lost. But for example, if you would constrain it to Noble, if you fixed up 20 signs, I promise you would notice a significant difference. And so here's some examples. This one is an awning component grant from Beaufort, South Carolina, where they did about, 30 or 40 awnings, made a big impact on the downtown. This is Hartsville, South Carolina, where they're currently offering sign grants. And again, it's amazing when you offer people a little bit of money to sweeten the pot with the money they were already going to spend on the sign. Guess what happens? You tend to get better and more artistic and more, aesthetically pleasing signs. And especially, by the way, does everybody know the golden rule about incentives? He with the gold makes the rules. And so the nice thing is when you give this money away, then you can also make sure it attains a design standard that just brings up the whole visual quality of the downtown. In Searcy, Arkansas, they actually did grants for the rears of the building, which might be a great add-on to the whole alley approach that Amy suggested in her plan. Slipcover removal. I definitely saw some buildings downtown that could use some slipcovers being removed. And this is one in Conway, South Carolina, that when it was removed, it revealed this beautiful building underneath. But the best story about Conway is after they did this one, they realized the cost to remove and dispose the slipcover was not that great. They offered a one-time $1,000 towards a slipcover removal grant to the downtown property owners, and 5 of the remaining 6 in the downtown removed it. Just to orient you, this building right here is that building, this corner of the building here is this, and these 3 or these 3, and that's what they used to look like, and this is what they look like today. If you ask me, that was a really wise investment of $5,000 on behalf of the city to transform a big chunk of their downtown. So that is the component facade grant approach to grants. But now I want to shift the gear and take that and push it even farther to what we call vibrancy grants. And this is the reason. As Jay alluded to, you guys have got these game-changing catalyst projects on the horizon. By last estimate, or by what Kent and Toby told us, I think you've got 5 major redevelopment projects on the books that are going to be happening in the near future in the downtown. Those are going to be game changers. But I don't want you to wait. I want to give you some things that you can do Monday to go ahead and start turning the tide visually on the downtown to complement these major projects and meet in the middle with this very, very exciting and vibrant downtown. Ben laughs at me because I quote myself. And by the way, we architects, we hate to admit this out loud, but this is a true statement. Experience and environment trump architecture every time. And this is what I simply mean by that. You go to some of your favorite places in the world, and sometimes if you pay attention, the architecture is only mediocre. That is not the case here. What I'm featuring here is primarily Greenville, South Carolina, where Ben's from. Greenville, South Carolina is a phenomenal downtown, chock full of restaurants and niche retailers and a gorgeous streetscape. And it's so good, it is so engaging that you don't even notice the fact that the buildings are simply ordinary. And my point is this, every now and then we need to think about how we activate our downtowns in a new and creative way. Because streetscape projects and building redevelopments are extraordinarily expensive and they take a long time. What if we could figure out some ways and some places to spend less money, but to also create maximum visual impact? And that's the purpose of these vibrancy grants. And these vibrancy grants can be spent in any way. By the way, in the report, I will link you to Norfolk, Virginia, who's done this vibrancy grant program exceedingly well. And you can see how they match whatever a property owner wants to do. It could be chairs, benches, flags, banners, flowers, umbrellas, bistro tables, parklets, plantings, interactive art. All of these things, that there's a match of the grant monies to what the property owner is going to spend. And all of a sudden, your downtown just becomes alive with color and activity and animation. Ben and I worked in Delaware a couple of months ago, maybe almost a year ago today, and because of their seasonality, most of the year it's gray. And so what we needed to do for them was introduce a color grant. And so whether it's through umbrellas or Adirondack chairs, bistro umbrellas, just chock the downtown full of color. Life is too short to not have color in your life, okay? I have a passionate plea for color. And whether it's, again, through the chairs and the furnishings, but look at this. Isn't that the kind of place where you want to be? Those are the kind of places where people want to see and be seen. And these are the opportunities that these vibrancy grants can introduce. If you're on the fence about, affording these bistro tables and chairs, introduce vibrancy grants to get it past the tipping point and activate your downtowns. Now, we've heard, and by the way, I'm going to push back a little bit. Somebody said, our sidewalks are really, really narrow. They're not that narrow. We work in a lot of places that are a lot narrower than yours. But even in a narrow sidewalk, there are solutions. This is from Kent, Michigan. And you can see these are little foldable tables that can fold down flat on the wall when they're not in use, similar to the umbrellas that they can't out. That only takes up about 24 inches. Okay, so this activation can happen in a very small area. And again, you guys at Anniston are so smart. You figured out the other approach when your sidewalks are narrow. What do? You go in the other direction and you form a parklet. And again, so you've already done this parklet handbook and plan because you recognize this is a key strategy to activate and animate your downtown, especially when you have narrow sidewalk constraints. So look at what these parklets can introduce, whether it's through color or here, and especially in a place like Anniston, given the plethora of biking opportunities that you have, use that parklet space for parking for the bikes, dining activities, and just sitting opportunities to really bring the downtown to life. Don't forget about the sidewalk. Okay, sometimes we just think it's a thing to walk on. It can become a canvas for art to occur on. Whether it's chalk art, these ladies in North Carolina, I love what they're doing. They call these magic carpet murals. I just call them flat murals. And they paint murals on the sidewalk that you walk. And the nice thing about what they do is they can either do it for you or they can provide stencils where you do the outline and then you bring students and people and everybody. In other words, Rodney, you get to paint the red, and who else do I know in the room? David, you get to paint the blue, and so everybody gets to play. Again, the message that you heard from Mary's vision statement to the end is downtown belongs to everybody. Everybody should get to play. And then fill the downtown with interactivity and art. This lady right here is my neighbor. She's a fabulous artist. And what she's done, I don't know if you can tell, is she took propane tanks, inverted them, cut off the valve stuff, made them different sizes so they create a different tune. She engages them with the seats, and you can walk in downtown Columbia and play these inverted propane tanks as a musical instrument. It's a place to sit, but it's also a place to play. Guess what? Do you think those are ever open? No. People are always sitting on those because of the choice seats downtown. It can be interactive art like Before I Die, I Want To, or just spinning things. And don't, whatever you do. We worked in a town, for crying out loud. They outlawed buskers. Really? Really? Come on, people. Let your students play the guitar or play the cello in your downtown. To me, it's a fabulous thing to do. And then you've got all of these spaces. Remember we talked about pocket parks before and the things that you can do in your strategic plan? If you've got these leftover spaces, or until they are developed as plazas, or until they're occupied by a building, go ahead and take advantage of them and create all of these elements that promote what I call stickability in your downtown. That when you come downtown, especially with your kids, there's things to keep you there. Just let them play bocce on the lawn. Or perhaps buy a couple of cornholes. Giant checkers or chess, portable ping pong. This is one of my favorite, giant Jenga. I'd play giant Jenga in your downtown. So again, just populate your downtown with all of these things that promote stickability. And fund those through Vibrancy Grants to populate your downtown with lots of activity. I'm going to conclude my remarks with 3 photo renderings that I did. And they occur in places in your downtown that will highlight an initiative that Ben is going to address in just a moment. He made a very astute observation, which is this. Your downtown is so large that if you don't break it down into some smaller chunks, you will give people a reason or an excuse to claim that nothing's being done. In other words, if you just do one initiative in all of your downtown, it's going to be hard to say it. But if we can district your downtown in distinct areas, then the initiatives of each in those areas will make a greater impact. And so in our mind, and again, I'm not going to steal Ben's thunder, we certainly see in your downtown, Quintard Avenue has a certain character and flavor. Noble Street certainly has a certain character and flavor. The railroad area over by the railroad certainly has a certain character and flavor. And so each of these renderings correspond with those areas. Along Quintard, I think everybody's familiar with this environment. Does everybody know where we are in the life of this photo? Okay. And so here, you're dealing with a transitional area, you know, where it's both historic as well as new. And the only thing that we want to emphasize here is whenever you put new architecture along Quintard, make sure it satisfies good, sound downtown urban planning principles. And those at least would include these. Number one, move it as close to the street as you possibly can so that these buildings address the roadway. You want to make sure they address the pedestrian, and you give the entry back to them. So often people want them to drive or park in a parking lot in front of the building. We want to put the parking, as you can see here, behind the building so that you begin to create a strong visual street edge. I promise you what will slow traffic down more than any marked sign is putting things near the roadway. Ben will show you some of the wayfinding signage designs in just a moment. This, of course, is on Noble Avenue. This is the old or the historic Calhoun Theater. And we just wanted to show an image of what it would look like if it was restored. And thankfully, we have historic photographs to guide this. The actual marquee still exists, albeit in dilapidated shape, but showing how it could be restored to become a vibrant, you know, host or anchor in your downtown area for that particular element of the arts. Since we got we'll go back and go forward one more time. And then last but not least, over in the area near the railroad, we love this building, the Madden Poultry building over by Rodney's Chiha Brewing Company. And to me, this building, and by the way, we just picked on this one because it's obvious, but there are dozens of buildings just like this over in that area that you could pick on. Not pick on, but you know what I mean, that we could highlight to become really exciting venues. And since it was a poultry company, we just decided it ought to be the Chicken Shack, okay? Yeah, and so imagine outdoor dining opportunities on the deck. I mean, I can easily see a band setting up either here or here with either the crowd in this forecourt on the grass or even set up in the parking lot, and it becomes a downtown music venue as well. But have some fun with these buildings, and that's the beauty of this district, is that it has the opportunity to be transitional. It doesn't have to be as purely historic preservation oriented as Noble or even Quintard. So thank you very much.
They always give me like 13 minutes to wrap up, and it's like, okay, y'all go long, and then I get to rush through everything. As everybody else has done, we have our text-heavy slide talking about what in the world promotions does. Typically, the promotions committee becomes known as the event organizers. But that committee needs to do a lot more than that. To a certain degree, we've listened to the first 3 points, talk about all the different planning and designing and thinking and recruiting and all this kind of stuff. It's almost like planning a wedding. And then we get to that promotions point when we send out the invitations. So I've simplified this down to 5 main areas. Number 1, develop Main Street Aniston's image. So Main Street is an organization. 2, launch downtown brand. 3, cultivate a communication channel. 4, develop strategic event schedule. And then finally, create downtown evangelists. I'm going to talk a little bit about what each one of those means. So when we start off, we have to talk about this idea of the image for Main Street Anniston. And I always like to use an illustration, and I'm smart enough in Alabama to know that you can't use one illustration, you have to use two illustrations. So when you look at major universities, they kind of set this very interesting tone where they have academic logos and athletic logos. Communities need the exact same thing. We need to understand that there's a difference between organizational identities and destination brands. So many times we might have a chamber, we might have a Main Street organization, they'll create a logo for themselves, and then they'll use that same logo to promote the place. Well, what happens if that organization does something that irritates people? The city is a governmental body that levies taxes. They're not always going to be on the top of everybody's list. But that doesn't mean that we don't want our private sector and our nonprofits and our event organizers to stop promoting the place. So that understood difference between organization identity and destination brand is hugely important. So what we wanted to do was we wanted to create an identity for the Main Street organization. We wanted it to be very contemporary. We wanted it to have them be able to exist in an economic development arena. So what we put together for this was just a simple, clean, stylized A. The A is made up of 4 components. It helps us to tell that story of the 4 points. Believe it or not, just because you're a historic downtown, you don't have to put an old light post on your logo. Just because you're a Main Street, you don't have to have a streetscape of all your buildings. You can actually be appropriate in the arena that you're existing in. Now, once you adopt an organizational identity, you need to start talking and thinking about launching that downtown brand. And you've got that organization identity in play. We wanted to do something that was very clean and contemporary and just made sense. I believe that your community has done some amazing things. I've been visiting this place for almost 14 years. And I have always felt like there was a huge difference between what the reality of Anniston was and what the perception from locals were. And to a certain degree, when you have a historic downtown, it's kind of like owning a classic car. Does anybody know anybody that's got a classic car? Takes constant money and constant effort to keep those suckers going. That's why classic car owners have cruise-ins, because they need other people to tell them how beautiful their car is, right? So communities are the same way. We need that feedback loop. We need to hear about how beautiful our place is. We don't have to have a logo that shows exactly every building in our downtown. So what we're suggesting here, again, something very simple, clean, strong, and bold. Something that can be expandable as you go through. Something that can become iconic. It ties into a lot of that imagery that the city has been using for years and years. That kind of patriotic-based imagery and that model city identity. But it also gives you that opportunity to just kind of take it and run with it. Now, once you have those 2 things, there's obvious coordination between those with our color, our type selection, and our approach to graphics. But then there's also the independence between the 2. Now, we heard Randy talk a little bit about the idea of districting your downtown. And to us, it seemed to make sense that those districts were pre-existing character districts that ran vertically through your district, or through your downtown. So we're suggesting 3 different district identities. On the western side, along the rail bed, we called it the Foundry District. It could be called the Railroad District. It could be called whatever you want. We do believe that your connection to your Foundry history is very, very relevant to your character of place. So we gravitated towards that as being unique. We call Quintard Boulevard District the physical attributes of that roadway and the relationship between the buildings and the road. And then finally, the Noble District, that downtown core itself. Once you have the tools in play, you can start to integrate it into tools to tell that story, whether you're doing brochures to promote the downtown. Now, we've heard a little bit of talk about this so far. This is your downtown as it exists today. And this is every place that you can park. If you've ever seen a figure-ground relationship of parking amenities in downtown, you would know that this actually is a pretty large collection of assets. But if you are like I think you might be, when Randy said earlier that you don't actually have a parking problem, some of you might have questioned that in your mind. You might have said, I don't know about that. I'll tell you this is the problem that you have. You have a consumer mindset problem. You are a community that exists in a convenience mindset. And as you do all of this work that we have been talking about, your community is going to migrate from a convenience mindset to a destination mindset. And the motivation of your consumers is going to increase. And therefore, when you go through that, they're going to be willing to park here and walk there. It changes that relationship. But when you hear people complain about parking today, they're complaining about not being able to park immediately in front of the business that they want to go to because they're not actually interested in spending 4 hours downtown. So that transitional mindset is something that is going to occur as you go through this, but you've got to help it along. This is one of the most important signs that exist in any kind of signage system, making sure your public parking and your private parking is signed. People know where they can go. An overall wayfinding system might look something like this. It includes everything from pole-mounted gateways, trailblazer signs, parking signs, informational kiosks, district entry portals. So you're starting to own that communication. Now, if you look at this and you say, that looks like a lot of new signs, we got enough signs as it is, jobs of wayfinding systems is to reduce the overall signage clutter. Typically, signs are done like this. You identify that there's a need, and then you slap up a sign. And then 3 months later, there's a different need. You slap up a different sign, put up by a different person in a different color and a different typeface, and next thing you know, you have 7,000 signs. And many of them tell you what you can't do. So you got to make sure that sign system is really creating a seamless experience. Street banners, being able to have banners that help to tell the story, using banners to denote these different districts throughout the community. We heard Jay talk a lot about how you can deal with spaces, and then of course Randy showed you some of those vacancy treatments. Being able to own each and every opportunity that exists in your downtown. Now, even though this totally was not my responsibility, nor did I have permission, I wanted to look at the city as well because I feel like everything is tied together. The city has they've been very, very consistent with their messaging. So what I wanted to do was simply show an update to that system so that it all can fit in together. Again, using the same typeface, using the same color palette, adopting that message that they had always used of the model city, and being able to take that and carry that into yet another century of moving the downtown forward. Being able to have a system that allows you to wrap your arms around the different character districts and sub-districts of the community as a whole, like West Anniston, and being able to show that it is a community that connects with that overall top community level. We talked about the vision identity and simply changing that typeface and keeping that idea of one city, one vision around. Now, as Randy mentioned, you all have got a huge collection of plans. You have been very well planned. The concept of model city goes all the way back to planning. And it's time to do. And one of the things that we want to see is we want to see and share that it is not a single entity's responsibility to do. It is the community's responsibility to do. And we don't have to pick a big project and then make all the excuses as to why that big project can't happen yet. It's all of our responsibilities to do. So we wanted to introduce what we're calling Planiston, because we're clever and we like funny things. Simply being able to make sure that there is a relationship between the citizens of Anniston and the plans that exist so that those citizens and their desires can continue to drive the implementation of these plans. Because without the passion of the people, the plans gather dust. So being able to make planning something that is about doing, is about implementation, I think that's something that's exciting for us. We also heard Jay talking about the idea of creating a business-friendly culture and taking that process to street level. We love the idea of calling that something like pipeline. And he was very cleverly, he incorporated that into it. Being able to simply create this process that makes it very clear that when somebody comes to the city and says, I'm interested in starting a business, that person is seen as a customer, not, oh, wait until you see the roadblocks I can throw in front of you. So that customer culture that has been introduced and is starting to make its way through the city, this gives you yet another way to say, hey, we are here for you. We heard things like ideas about having Wi-Fi available downtown. Anytime you do amenities like that, make sure that it ties back into the brand so the community is getting credit for all the efforts that you're making. Then from there, cultivate a communications channel. How many times have you done something and people said, I didn't know anything about it? Well, I ran an ad in the paper. I posted it on social media. We had TV ads. We had a skywriter. We had men jumping out of planes with it tattooed all over their bodies. Yeah, but you didn't come to my house and tell me personally. You know, so you've got to use this consistency of message and consistency of appearance to be able to cultivate the communication channel. So anytime you're out there, make sure that you're using your brand to connect the dots. So this is a Main Street Anniston page that already exists. I'm simply changing out your imagery so every time your voice says something, it's attributing back to that graphic identity. One-on-one communication, making sure that as you're going around that you appear to be part of this professional organization. Main Street needs to have a consolidated media list of all the local media contacts, needs to keep that list up to date, and needs to make that list available to businesses and event organizers in the downtown district so that you're making the process of getting the word out easy. Adopt an online press release tool. There are plenty of them out there that make it simple to create a professional press release. This is something that I have been involved with numerous cooperative advertising campaigns in the past. Most of them are a complete and total train wreck. Because what ends up happening is you get 14 different businesses decide that they want to go in and throw money in to buy an ad. And then you take that ad and you divide it up into 14 equal itty bitty little spaces. And then you got to collect money from 14 different people to pay the one advertiser. And it ends up not making the impact that it was intended to have by having everything clustered together. What we would like to see you all do is start to bring together your businesses on an annual basis alongside the local media and have the media collectively pitch those businesses. So you start to leverage the buying power of all of your businesses together while also having them thinking strategically and possibly having partnerships cultivate out of that process. So make it a little bit easier on yourself, but also make it more beneficial for everyone involved. Develop strategic event schedule. Now, it's in terms of the events that go on. Typically in the Main Street world, there are 3 different types of events. They're image building events, they're business events, events that make the cash registers ring, and special events. You've got a couple events in each one of those categories. What we tried to do was do quick redesigns on those logos so we could show how they fit in. Starting with image building, the new event this year, the Shamrock and Color Run. Okay, this is a great opportunity to just kind of expose people to your downtown and build the image of the activity downtown. But again, through your typeface, through your color, you're able to tie those things in. Now, from a business event, you've got something that has recently been renamed the Makers Market. The Makers Market is going to happen on Fridays downtown, every 4th Friday downtown, but it's actually going to move. It's going to be a mobile event, so it exposes people to different parts of your downtown. So being able to have that Makers Market that fits in and reinforces the identity of that. In terms of special events, Niwala. And, having ways, and I showed 2 different examples here because you can take all these different paths. There's a lot of different latitude in your design. Another thing that we're suggesting is a simple concept of adopt-a-block. So you start to build relationships between organizations, block awareness, cleanliness, all those type things. It's not enough to plan strategic events. You've got to measure them afterwards. There are 5 main keys to that: attendance, attitudes, impact, value, and goals. And I have a fantastic slide for each one of those that I'm going to go through quickly because it's time to go. But you need to know how many people attended. You need to know whether people liked it or not. What were the attitudes of the participants, of the vendors? The impact of the businesses, that economic impact, measuring whether it made a difference to them. Was there a value to your sponsors? Did your sponsors get anything out of it, or did they feel like they were giving away free money for nothing in return? And did you achieve the goals of the strategy in the first place? And then finally, the idea of creating downtown evangelists, making sure that your citizens become your biggest fans. So every single time you do something downtown, you make sure that you're getting credit for it. This says another project, another win, go team. Another restaurant, another place to gather, another date night, go us. Nothing happens here. There were 2,000 people here Friday night. Just kind of putting it back and telling that story, but also making sure that the identity can make its way to merchandise, make its way to the way that businesses can profit from it. Whether you're making hats, got a couple coffee shops coming online, making coffee cups. This concept of brand co-oping, where you take your identity and you put it right next to a pre-established brand, you actually absorb some of their known value and contribute it into your value. So doing things like that, premium products, merchandise and wearables, being able to give people the opportunity to show the pride that they have in their community. And with that, I get to turn it back over to Mary to wrap it up.
So great team. Are you happy? Yeah, you should be. This has been a wild ride to do this in a community that's been established for so long. So what I want to talk to you just real briefly about was next steps, because that's what, we can talk about all this fun stuff up here, but how do we get this implemented? And Main Street is all about boots on the ground implementation. That's what we do. That's what we're good at. So the next step will be for us to get this report back to the Main Street Board. And then I'll be spending some time with Meredith and her board and her committees, taking the goals that are set in this, the goals from the board, and putting them into work plans. And once they're on the work plans, guys, it's time to go. So part of my job as your state coordinator is a little bit of mom thing, a little bit of thumb in the back, a little bit of, are you doing what you said you were going to do? So we want to go back to make sure, if you're interested in being involved in this, sign up for one of the committees. Conduit of information goes through the Main Street office. If you want to be involved, this is the time to be involved with what's happening here in Anniston. So thank you for your time. We have appreciated our time here. I know Meredith has a drawing to do and a couple of things to finish up. But
well, before we leave, we got each